we'll start. Thank you. There'll be a question and answer session at the end when we get towards the last 15 minutes or so. But if you have any questions or comments in the meantime, please just contact us via the chat, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And you can send messages to everybody, or just to myself or Eva or Esther, who's kindly organised today's event and is available for any technical support as well. Okay, so on to the next. So this is what we're going to be doing today. We've done the first bit. We're going to talk about kind of this kind of crazy situation that we're in right now. And I'm gonna kick off the first bit, and I'm going to be talking about really kind of talk about this word that we use a lot, this word unprecedented, right? And there's a lot of pressures on the cash flow, on the working capital, on the order to cash area, and we're going to introduce all of those. Then I'm going to hand over to Eva, and she's going to take you through the Serrala and the Serrala solutions. Okay, so but like I said, any questions anytime, please feel free to just to fire away and drop us a line. So if you go on to the next one, please. Okay, so to kick off then, we have we'd like you to participate in a vote, please. So we want to just to kick off and set the scene. The voting panel will appear shortly. And the question is, from your perspective, your portfolios, your clients, what would you say is the ideal state of the percentage overdue in total? So is it less than 5%, up to 12%, up to 20%, or more than 20%? So if you just select one of those, please, and press submit, and we look forward to seeing the answers in a few seconds. So what have we got? Excellent. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you said that. That everyone is aspiring to get the overdues of 5% or less. And I think if there's one key lesson to take away from the last year or so, it's that all receivables balances should always be as close to zero overdue as possible. I think over the last 10 years or so, perhaps since the last recession, it's been very tempting and very easy to focus more on the sales and other aspects of business, and the receivables has perhaps in many cases has not had the necessary attention it deserves. And then when we move into situations like this, then there's a little bit of a panic situation, because we're trying to undo some bad habits and get back to that low percentage overdue. So good stuff. Right. So question, what happened in the last 12 months then? Well, quite a few things really. And this is just a couple of them. I'll actually share a few more shortly. So I guess the big ones then, was the recession was the first one. Obviously the coronavirus situation has affected us all globally. And then just to make life particularly interesting for the European Union and the UK, we had Brexit as well. Now, I think one thing something that's kind of a fact is that the recession would have happened anyway. The coronavirus situation just exacerbated it. But we've known for 2 or 3 years, and we've hosted presentations from economists far more wiser than myself, who have been predicting that the recession would take place around about 2020. And the other thing that's an absolute fact is in 10 or 12 years time, there'll be another recession, and then another one 10 years after that. This happens. There was one in 2008, and there'll be plenty more to come. So having the recession, working from home, and Brexit, this is just part of the complication. I say, and there's 4 or 5 more things I will cover shortly. The Brexit element is something that I think now that we're kind of 2 months into this year, it is now really starting to be realised by businesses. Just a couple of points here. We're talking about changing regulations, the lack of transparency, the very fact that the deal was kind of rushed through in the end on like Christmas Eve didn't help. But there's a myriad of issues that are going on. If you can just pop on to the next one, please, Eva. So we've got all these various issues, and all of these will directly impact receivables. So delays at ports and border crossings. So that means that goods are going to be delivered late. So there will be invoice disputes because of the late deliveries. There will also be goods that are become out of date, particularly foodstuffs. So there'll be invoice disputes because of the quality of the products. Frankly, businesses don't really know what the full complexity of moving outside of the European Union actually means. And as we say here, it really means there's going to be a huge increase in import taxes, import duties, administration fees from the hauliers and the carriers, and an awful lot of extra administration and costs and charges that are going to be passed on to either the importers or the exporters, and they're all not going to want to actually bear those costs, so they're going to pass them on basically to the companies that are buying. So at a high level, these are the issues. But when we come down to our area, to collections, to risk management, to cash allocation, it's really right down to the detail of things like, is there a GL code to actually capture these new charges? Are we putting these charges onto the invoices? Do the customers know these charges are coming? So it's only now, I think, the full impact is starting to be revealed. If you look in the newspapers, like the Guardian newspaper, for example, every day you will see headlines of particularly small businesses, fishermen, small companies at the moment, importing and exporting, who are reporting a lot of the things I've just been saying. But that's because they are small businesses, they're feeling the heat a lot quicker. As we all know, corporates, it tends to take a little while longer for the impacts to come through. But I'm convinced that by the end of March, all of you guys that have imports and exports to the UK, you will also start to really see a high number of disputes and all the other elements that I've been talking about. If anybody wants, later on after this, I've got a checklist of 20 things to go through with regards to Brexit, and I'd be happy to share that if anybody wants it. But the impact that's going to happen really is all of these things here. Productivity is going to be affected, spending, but particularly I think from our side, there's going to be a high volume of disputes, which is going to equal late payments, which is going to really impact the cash flow and working capital. And this is on top of all the, if you had a number of overdues already from 2020, so you've got 2 very distinct kind of invoices now, before and after the new year. Okay, if we can just go on to the next one, please. So what can we do? Well, let's have a look. I think the first thing really, what we can do to minimize the damage really is just to, first of all, just to accept the fact that it's happening, and to aim to achieve this 5% overdue. Now that may not happen quickly, but I think over the course of 2021, that can be achieved, but it's going to take a lot of strategic, detailed management, strategy planning, and it may, well, it will need for there to be deviations from what's been standard kind of practice management in the past, and we'll continue to talk about that as we go forward. So we just pop on to the next one. Right. So if that wasn't enough, the recession, COVID, Brexit, of course, the transition to working from home. I think the next 3 or 4 things I'm going to introduce are the ones combined. All of this lot here are the ones where we could actually say right now the times are unprecedented. It's a word that gets bandied around a lot these days, unprecedented, and it normally is in relation to the COVID situation and then working from home. But in all my working experience, I've never actually been in a time when all of these 8 things that you see here are all happening at the same time. So I talked about 3 of them or 4 of them working from home. We include increased costs, and I think this is important to bear in mind, because you might be thinking that bank interest rates haven't changed, and that's true, and this, I would very much doubt if bank interest rates will change, other than maybe even go down anymore, if that's at all possible. But what is going to increase, and we're already starting to see it, is increases in VAT, increases in taxes to companies, increases into health insurance, fuel costs will go up, insurance costs will go up, and there'll be 100 things where the prices will, the costs will increase by 1 or 2%. Now, each one in isolation, probably not a big deal, but if you're a company and 100 things all go up by 1%, that's going to have a massive effect on the additional costs in your company, and therefore an impact on profitability, which means even more, there needs to be an even greater focus on getting the cash in the bank. Political changes we've seen in the USA and the UK and in many other countries across the world. There are political changes. When you add that on, also in the near future, there's a lot of pressure going to be put on companies to reduce their carbon footprint. So this is another cost that all companies are going to have to deal with in many different ways, whether it's changing their transport policies, reducing the production of plastics for packaging or whatever it may be. But over in the 2020s, every company is going to have to do something to reduce its carbon footprint, and that's going to also be another cost and another level of complexity and responsibility put on the companies. And then moving into whatever we'll be talking about later, a lot of pressure also from the C-suite to embrace more of the technologies that are available. So of course that's also going to be a short-term cost, although there's a rapid ROI on technology, but that puts more strain on everybody again to go through the RFI and the RFP processes, to implement project management, and then to actually get full value out of whatever technology is being implemented, which means reskilling the staff, really understanding the product, new terminologies. So this bunch of issues is somewhat unprecedented. It's also, to look at it from a positive side, it's also incredibly exciting. And for all of you that are working in the credit area, this is, if you're not already, this is your opportunity to show to your businesses that you are subject matter experts, you're consultants to your company, and you're the guys that are right in the front line of ensuring that the biggest single current asset in your company, trade receivables, is well maintained, well looked after, maximized as much as possible, and that you are future proofing this valuable asset and protecting it in the months and years to come. So so there we are, plenty of food for thought there, lots of interesting things coming along. So I don't think you're going to be bored for the next few years, that's for sure. So yeah, a quick voter question then, again, just to kind of get towards the end of my section. For the 8 things there, or indeed others as well, just a quick yes or no answer, please. Are you already feeling some of the impacts of this perfect storm in your order to cash area?
This is going very rapidly.
Big one.
I said this is going very rapidly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you can talk. You can talk very slowly. You can talk very slowly. If anybody wants to comment anything I've said, or you want to disagree, please ping us a chat message, and like I say, we can discuss it more later as well towards the end. Okay, so yeah, 10% of people said no. I'd like to know who that is, but pretty well everybody is saying yes. There is some impact. Okay, right. That's for the moment. That's more or less it from myself. So I'm just setting the scene. I'll be here. I'll be interacting with Eva as we go forward, and we'll be discussing different points as we continue for the rest of the presentation. But for now, thank you very much. And Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone. My name is Eva. I'm a solution architect at Serrala, a software company who has expertise in the end-to-end finance value chain. And I'm very pleased to be here today with Mark and Esther to give you some insights around automation of your finance value chain area. My expertise area is credit and collections and disputes. Given the situation that Mark just described, we have chosen to focus on this collection and dispute area, particularly the disputes, because of course, with everything going on in the world right now, disputes are rising up, it's impacting DSO, unsatisfied customers, so it's really a hot topic for a lot of organizations. For the audience here, there's one individual who's not feeling the impact yet. I would like to know at the end of the session if that's really the case. I'm sure everywhere, somewhere in the organization, you're going to have some form of impact given by the COVID, given by BREXIT, some climate change, etc. So today I'm going to quickly take you through who we are as an organization. So Serrala is a German-based organization. It's been around for more than 35 years, starting off with expertise in the sub add-on environment for the finance value chain. But today, of course, we're growing along like many other businesses into the cloud space, so we can offer our customers flexibility, which means that we won't be dealing just with sub ERP systems. So that's going to broaden our horizon, so to speak, bring that flexibility that businesses really need today. A lot of businesses are obviously very keen to have this very low overdue, good DSO number. But at the same time, as Mark said earlier, we all see every 10 years this recession coming. And yet there's plenty of organizations who are kind of surprised, right? And they are surprised because they really feel the impact, particularly if the recession comes quite out of nowhere, for example, with the COVID this time. And you can question yourself, could you have done something, to prevent it, right? That's the idea, of course. And this is exactly what we as an organization obviously help companies with. So again, we are globally represented. So we operate in Europe, Asia, and the North and Latin Americas, and we have years of expertise. So what we're doing exactly today, we're looking at order to cash with the focus on the collections and disputes, but we're also operating in the procure to pay areas, data and document management, treasury and cash visibility, and payment management. I won't go into this too deep. The presentation will be available afterwards, so you can take a look, and if any of those subjects take your interest to find out more, then of course you can reach out to us at any time. And again, we are sub experts, but we are now doing all these cloud developments. And I think, organizations, they want to have something that's going to be, helping them bring efficiency, standardized processes. For some organizations, it's looking to reduce costs, for example, maybe reduce the number of FTEs. Other organizations just want to restructure and really bring the benefit of having those FTEs doing other valuable things in the organization. So you can get the best possible results doing your day-to-day tasks. Now, of course, we know in connections, for example, it's a very agile environment. There's a lot going on. You don't know how your customer is going to react from one day to the next. Customers that paid well all along may now, because of a recession, all of a sudden not pay so well anymore. Disputes are up in the rising. So you want to be able to handle that quickly and make sure that you have minimum impact as a result. So we think that automation of processes will really help you optimize your working capital position, your cash flow. And of course, you want to have security and compliance features that are solid and embedded in your systems. And you want to have solutions that are scalable for the future, because your business might expand into different territories, or you may attract new kind of businesses altogether, acquisitions, etc. So this is all what we offer at Serrala. And of course, as I just described, the current situation, particularly the last 12 months, has been very difficult for a lot of people. The working from home, I guess, for a lot of organizations is not really helping in being efficient communication-wise. So all of these little things are adding up, and customers are going to be defaulting regardless, because of course of the constrained cash flow positions they're in. You have to make tons of extra connection efforts. Being in your home office, that might not be as efficient as possible. And as a result, of course, these overdue balances are actually going up, even though we desire these really low overdue balances and a really strong, good DSO. But does that mean that there is nothing that you can do? No, that's at least at Serrala not what we believe. So we think if you kind of investigate, on the options of solutions that are out there available that fit your organization, that doesn't mean to say you need to implement it today, but you can really do some discovery work, so to speak, to see what works to enhance your environment, and also in any given situation. So if you're working only in the office, or if you're going to be working from home like now, hopefully temporarily, but there will also be organizations who choose to have their staff working at home in the future to reduce office space costs. So you need to be prepared to work with something that's going to help you work as efficiently as possible. So we're looking here at the full customer to cash end-to-end process, so to speak. And as I said today, we're going to focus here on the last two buckets, so connection management and dispute management, because we obviously want to kind of show you, like, by managing your disputes efficiently and also have really solid collection processes and centralized collection processes, you can really try to maintain a good solid DSO and keep that overdue balance to a minimum. And of course, that will also help you get a satisfied customer. So before we kick off, we have another voter question. It's kind of an interactive session today. So do you have automated dispute processes and recording of your reporting? It's a simple yes and no question. And we're very interested to see if most people have this automated yes and no. Oh, it's very balanced. Oh, okay. Okay, it's already looking interesting. Kind of expected this outcome, of course. Okay, so the majority of voters have said no, or I don't know. Excuse me. One person has said yes, so that's really good. So that person is already ahead of everybody else here. So not having this, of course, is probably driving a lot of underlying issues, right? I've worked in order to cash myself for many years. And one of the things, of course, is always the dispute handling, for example, is very manual. You get your email from your customer, you need to review what's going on, you may need to reach out to the customer, get further information, and then you need to make sure that you gather all your contents so you can send it off to the right individual or team in the organization. You may not be on the same location as me, for them to then try and look into this dispute and give me an outcome. And this is a really time-consuming business, of course, particularly if you have a large portfolio and you have maybe customers with really large invoices and with high volumes of disputes. This is not a desirable way of managing this, I think. And there are actually options to do that differently. So we're going to start off with, okay, yeah, sorry.
So I think, Eva, if I could just jump in there, respond to the vote, which is very interesting. That the majority is saying that there's not an automated reporting and visibility of the disputes, and my view is that this isn't a nice to have. This is an absolute must have, irrespective of how it's put together, because as we were saying just now, but it's always the case anyway, irrespective of the situation we're facing right now, that everybody working in the credit and collections and cash allocation area really needs to have a real-time overview of the disputes, because as we go forward in the presentation from here, we'll emphasize that most of the intelligence that needs to be gathered to be able to respond to this very volatile situation that we're in, the real-time intelligence, like I said, is coming from what's happening today. So that can be short payments on cash receipts equals disputes, various responses, and maybe different responses from your customers, talking to your collection people, slowing down payments, questioning invoices more for all the reasons we said earlier about late deliveries and all that kind of thing. These are all critical warning signals that the situation is changing with your customers. And from a customer service, sales, other parts of the business respect, this is one of the areas I think needs to change and to be looked at rapidly, because methods and internal processes that took place up until, so let's say a year ago, in almost all cases are not going to apply today. So your reports from your credit reference agencies are still an important part of understanding a company's abilities to pay and their credit worthiness, but as we all know, they are, because of the nature of what they are, they're always going to be out of date. And the real decision making is happening today, and that's also why I refer to the need for everybody really within the business to be kind of reskilled or upskilled, or thinking in the world as it is at this moment in time. So be able to have a view of disputes and so on in real time is absolutely essential. So sorry, Eva, back to you.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you, and thanks for the input. And I think actually additionally to this, it's also, if you have a high volume of dispute, which is probably most likely right now, it's on the one hand, you will have those customers who just raise disputes so they can pay you a bit later, but you also, of course, have the very genuine disputes. Of course, you want to keep your customer happy, right? No customers doesn't help either. So it's also very nice if you can handle your disputes quickly internally, but also if you can respond to your customer efficiently, rapidly with an outcome to the dispute. And that will help them as well, adapt their payment behavior towards you, right? If you have to choose out of 3 vendors and one is never responding in time, you're probably going to pay the other vendor first. So this is very common in the market. We all know this. So it's really, really key to be on top of the disputes, but also to understand your disputes internally, right? If you can also harmonize that process internally quicker, you can also maybe do better root cause analysis to find out why do we actually have those disputes. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. So let's move on to the first slide. So first of all, as I said, so in Serrala, we're experts in the sub add-on solutions. Not to worry for those individuals attending here today that are not in SAP. We are currently actually developing also cloud solutions, which can go with any other ERP. Today's session is just to give you an idea about the automation options. So we're just using this sub add-on, but it could be something else as well. So if we're looking at our, we call it FS2 Connections and Dispute Solution. FS2 stands for Finance Suite 2, which is an upgrade from Finance Suite 1. It's a centralized platform embedded in your SAP, but sitting in its own namespace. And it's basically a layer into your SAP that provides all connection functionalities that you require to do efficient and centralized connection management. And that doesn't mean to say that your team needs to be centralized. It could be actually decentralized or even from home working, but that all the data that is contained within any of your connection activities is captured within this solution, which means that anybody that has access to the solution can see this data, which means communications, for example, any kind of approvals that have been taken place. So first, if we look at the steps that we have there for a in-house connection activities, it covers pretty much everything. So we can, for example, place a collection call, we can capture a promise to pay, then we can do write-offs, we can create payment plans, very handy for those customers who may be a bit slower with payment these days. There's also in-house dunning, there's legal dunning, so you can actually send it out to a legal party, etc. There's all the communications are captured there, and all your approvals, all centrally on one customer file. And this is really important, I think, if you want to work as efficient as possible, because having the total picture in front of you always helps making swifter and better decisions, how to handle a specific customer, right? So then, of course, we have this additional layer to the solution. This is actually a cloud solution and could be really useful for organizations who have like small companies they deal with. So medium-sized businesses or small businesses where we have the RTP, so the request to pay functionality, which means that from our solution, they will, through this RTP cloud platform, receive a payment request on a mobile phone or via email, where they have a payment link directly in the body of the email, and they can make the payment, or they can actually not make the payment but dispute the particular invoice, so that then feeds back directly into the solution. And that, of course, again, brings efficiency, right? Because you don't need to chase the customer, you don't need to make 25 phone calls, so this data is coming straight back in. So that kind of, these little steps of efficiency will really save your staff time, so they can focus on what is value adding in their workday, rather than what happens quite a lot, I think, from my own experience in connections activities, is gathering data, right? Preparing to actually do any connection activity, which is really time consuming. And just to give an example, I was recently speaking to an organization, and 2.5 days out of the week, they're just busy prepping to do other 2.5 days of connection activities, which is crazy if you think about it, right? But this is the reality how a lot of organizations work. And these are not just small organizations, there are some really global organizations who still operate this way. And they think they're being efficient because they don't know any better, because they haven't taken the chance or the time to review what they're doing and actually what are they spending their time on. So we as Serrala, when we introduce our solutions to prospects, then of course we want to understand how is the week looking for their staff. And then you get those kind of answers back. It's kind of almost shocking that you think, they're spending this much time on just prepping, which is completely non-value adding. And in the meantime, on the other hand, the disputes are, getting higher and higher, where the 2.5 days, for example, could be focused on managing those disputes in an automated way, get those out of the way, and you have less connection effort in the other 2.5 days because you serve your customers better. So you can see that there is really a benefit in having automated, centralized processes, so to speak. And of course, really important, and this is something we've actually very recently launched, is, for example, also to have the customer to have access to data directly through a receivables portal or B2B portal, however you want to call it. You know, so the customer can actually log in, see what is their outstanding invoices, raise a claim or a dispute in the portal. Again, that would be a cloud solution, of course, that is added into the solution. But again, it, you know, saves a lot of time because you don't have to call the customer for every single invoice to ask them what is going on. They can already notify you. Of course, this may need a little bit of training for the customer in the beginning, but I think once they get used to such a method of doing things, you will see that in the longer run, this could be really, really bringing some efficiencies. So let's move on. So I think, you know, now we're talking about collection efforts and disputes. As we saw earlier, DSO, everybody wants to have a healthy DSO. It's key. So, you know, very important to have these centralized collection activities for visibility purposes. It's only when you create visibility through automation that you get everybody to work in a standardized way. And that will, of course, help people respond quicker. And also people know what they expect. I think this is also very important. From my own experience, again, you know, if you have your own part of the portfolio, you email your customers, they have a dispute, they do all this information gathering, but none of my peers don't really know what I'm doing. So, you know, but it's important that you all have this visibility, because maybe what I'm doing may also have an impact on a linked account, for example, under an umbrella, you know, and maybe they need to know about it as well. So it's really important to have this visibility. Then, of course, automate this dispute management and standardize communication, because again, we're all emailing independently, and some people tend to write whole emails what they've been doing in the weekends before they get to the business piece, and other people write 2 lines. You know, but it's nice for a customer, I think, as well, if they have a standardized communication, because they know what they can expect from the vendor. And that will probably lead them to respond quicker, right? Because they know exactly what they're getting, what the format is. So they will like look at that in a different way than when they receive different styles of emails all along. So these are the 3 key strategies to help you ensure, at least in these difficult times, that you have a stable DSO. But ultimately, of course, the idea is to, even in difficult times, improve your DSO. And I guess that's what everybody wants. It's going to be a little bit tricky in those times, but it's not unachievable. So we look at a few things, and I just want to give you an example of, you know, what it could look like when you do, for example, a collection call. If you're just in a general organization, you have your ERP, you place a call, you're not going to log this anywhere, or most companies are not. I think about 90% of the organizations we speak with are not logging this anywhere, which means a collection clerk probably places somewhere between 20 to 40 calls a day, and none of that data, which could be very valuable data, is captured anywhere, unless there is a follow-up activity, which they will most likely schedule in their own calendar because it's their follow-up activity, which means no visibility, no data that you can fall back upon in case, you know, you need to look back on it. So in our solution, we have this, you know, collection call operation. And what that allows you is to actually select from all your contacts that you have on record for that particular customer, to select who you want to speak to. Then it will, of course, define who has spoken to the customer. So in this case, it will be me. And exactly when I did it, so you get a nice timestamp and call duration. And whilst I'm on the phone with my customer, what is being discussed, I can actually type in the text box, right? And when I save it, the record will be captured at the bottom in the list. So if I make 2 calls under this collection call, I will have 2 records, for example. But that data will stay on the customer file. So even 4 weeks later, if the customer didn't keep a promise to pay, for example, which he confirmed in this call, then I can always go back to this particular activity and pull up the data again and say, okay, I spoke with this person at that time, and this is exactly what we agreed, you know, and directly from that call, I've also created the actual follow-up activity. Now, typically, there will be 4 follow-up activities, apologies, that are really key. And that's, of course, a promise to pay. We all want to get that confirmation from the customer. They're overdue, they're going to pay as soon as possible. But it's really important that you capture this data, right? And there's nothing nicer than having this data automated. We'll be looking at promise to pay in a moment in a bit more detail. Then, of course, a dispute case. It could be that the customer says, okay, I don't want to pay this invoice, I'm overdue, but for a reason. Then there could be that there's a cash flow issue, which is something that's probably going to be more and more common this year, right? Lots of smaller companies, particularly who are very cash strapped, won't be able to pay, but at the same time are dependent on continuing business. So, you know, they don't want to be terminated as a customer either. So there you may want to consider implementing a payment plan so you can still receive your funds. And of course, a due date extension. So it's probably something that's also kind of like upcoming now, particularly for companies, I think, trading between the UK and Ireland and Europe. You know, with all the, as we saw earlier, the queues of the traffic, the lorries at the borders, you know, that customers are saying, I didn't receive my goods in time, so I want to get additional terms on my invoice. So this is really nice, right? So you can capture all your call data, you have this track record of it, and you can immediately schedule a follow-up activity as a result of this call by this customer saying, you know, I'm overdue, etc. So if we then see a promise.
Eva, can I just jump in for a sec?
Of
I think
course.
if you could just go back a couple of slides to the one before that one. With all the area that Eva's describing now, I think one thing or a particularly important thing to bear in mind is to where we say the word here, standardize and centralize, and that's to look at the total receivables portfolio from a global perspective. So in a shared service center environment, if you're responsible for 15 countries, that you actually, from the point of view of the shared service center, you combine and look at the data for all 15 or 20 countries together. Right? The reason for that is that there'll be many cases where you'll find that each country or each business unit is selling to the same company or a member of the same group. So when you're looking at the functionality that Eva's describing, when you bring it all together, you'll see lots of different ways that you can standardize, reduce variation, and for those of you familiar with lean processing, you can strip a lot of waste out. So if you're trading with the same company in 5 different countries, the collection strategies, they could be harmonized. So you only have one collection strategy, one payment method, one payment term, whereas at the moment it could be 5 or 6. You know, each country working in a silo is good in many ways, and obviously there has to be geographic kind of specialities. But when you're looking at it from a risk perspective and maximizing or minimizing the amount of work for your collection teams and dispute teams and so on, it really is important that it's looked at from this global perspective. And another and also is equally important that you look at, if not yourselves, that your colleagues on the accounts payable side are doing exactly the same thing with your suppliers, particularly your key suppliers, because there can be a lot of duplicated activity. Again, the same thing, you could be buying from the same company in 5 or 6 different countries and making 5 or 6 payments, which is not a standardized process, right? So I think just look at it individually, country by country, business units and so on, but also at least once a month, bring everything together as well and look at it from a global point of view. And there'll be a lot of different stories and a lot of different strategies can be made as a result of that. Sorry, Eva, back to you.
No, very good. and again, thanks for the input. And I think you're absolutely right here. What we always do say as well, I think, when you're going to consider automating your order to cash processes, or even your accounts payable, or any of your finance processes, to be honest, if you're considering implementing a solution, then of course, with this comes that you will have to look at your end-to-end processes as they stand today. And this is another interesting thing indeed, is when we speak to other companies, is that, they look at their processes and actually see that they've been doing the same thing for like 20 years. Nobody ever refreshed anything or looked at it and said, business has changed, our global presence has changed, our footprint has changed, but we haven't actually changed our processes along with this. So we're still doing this, and this is also driving those inefficiencies that they're having, right? And doing such an exercise, of course, a big thing, right? Because particularly global companies will have very complex structures. If you operate with shared service centers or decentralized, but a lot of countries, there are languages, then it's really a big exercise, but you will find it's really, really worth it. And although we're not talking credit today, but for example, a lot of organizations don't even have a credit policy, which always kind of surprises me. So then it would be really recommended to capture your new defined processes, right? Even if 80% is still the old style, and you've either eliminated a part of your old processes because they're not actually value adding, and you could do something better with this time and resourcing, or you create some new processes because you see that opportunity to bring new standardization, harmonization, capture them, make sure you have a policy. And it isn't only for credit, you can also have a connections policy, right? It doesn't need to be a bookwork, but it just needs to highlight the key steps that you're undertaking in your order to cash department, or any other department for that matter, so you know what you are doing, and you also know what's the impact internally for other areas in the business, and also a little bit what can you expect from the customer, or what can the customer expect from us. So I would really recommend that to consider doing this if you are going to think of automating any of your order to cash processes. And you will see that you'll probably, really find kind of return on investment internally, right? Just by cleaning up your in-house processes and saying, why are we doing it this way? Okay, so let's go back to a few of these things that you could do in the automation space. So here we set the connection call, capture the data, centrally visible on the customer account, so you can always look back. And make sure that you can have a follow-up activity, right? Because that's mostly what's going to come out of it. The majority of those are hopefully, of course, promise to pay confirmations from your customer, be it tomorrow, be it next week. But this is, of course, what we want to hear. And then again, typically these are not really captured centrally. The clerk is probably going to just stick a note in their calendar saying, oh yeah, that customer promised to pay then, or put a line item comment on FBO5N, for example. For those companies who work in SAP here will know what FBO5N is. So other organizations not working in SAP, you might capture it somewhere else, but but it's never really a good record, a complete record that will also notify the clerk if the customer hasn't actually kept this promise to pay, right? We have a note saying they're making this promise, but then are they actually doing it? To follow that piece up, we'll probably have to put it in the calendar again, and then check with the cash application team, or check with the customer, or whereas in our solution in Serrala, the promise to pay functionality, if you put in the date that the customer is going to pay these particular invoices for that amount, and the customer is not keeping to it, the clerk will get an automated notification in the daily work list. So they don't need to manage anything. The system will identify it, and the system will notify the clerk. And again, this saves a lot of manual activity, looking in the calendar, what am I expecting today, then following up with the cash app team. And you're thinking these are all minor things, but if you add them up day after day, it's hours a week that you're just spending on these kind of things. So very important to consider doing that in an automated way. Then let's take a look at the next one. A payment plan is another nice feature, and I've chosen this one as one of the connection strategy automation benefits to show you today, because I think there are a lot of organizations who will have customers who are not going to be able to pay their invoices in full or at all. But you may not necessarily want to lose this customer either, right? So, you know, what is then a good way of managing this? I would say a payment plan. You know, give the customer the opportunity to pay the outstanding AR over a longer period of time that is mutually agreed upon. Typically, and I've been there myself again, you know, a payment plan, you download something from your ERP system, you put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and you have to manage it manually, right? So you need to be on top of it to ensure you're going to get those installments as you agreed with the customer. But there is a good risk that you may forget to look that 1 week, or you know, the customer didn't actually pay on time and you forgot to check with the cash out team. So not very valuable at all, you know, if you made an agreement with the customer, but you're not actually getting the desired outcome. So having a feature in your connections environment that allows you to create payment plans, you know, that you can then generate, and you can actually see it here in the top of the picture, the payment plan agreement will give you the options how you want to define the payment plan. So we here, for example, have a balance of 3,441 euros. And do you want to have a certain sum per installment? Or do you want to get X amount of installments from the customer? So there's a flexibility there. When is the customer supposed to start with the first installment? And what is the rhythm of the installments? So in this case, for example, we want to get a payment every Monday of the week, starting the 16th of December 2019. So that means 11 installments for 344.10 euros. And once I've generated my payment plan, you see here at the bottom all the installments as the solution has calculated based on the criteria that we have defined. So each of these installments, it will then also reduce the balance until we get to that last installment and it's a zero balance. So once I've generated this payment plan, then I can send a correspondence to the customer, and that will be auto-filled, this correspondence. So in our solution, we use predefined templates, which will pull data directly from the solution into the templates, which is on letterhead paper. I will show you a bit later. And we can then email that directly from the solution to the customer, meaning that I have a record of what I've sent to the customer, which is this particular payment plan. And then, of course, I need to await the response from the customer. So the customer is going to go, okay, yeah, I agree with your payment plan for now. So then maybe I need to even then get an internal approval. So the customer has agreed with this payment plan. My boss needs to agree it as well. So then we can trigger an automated approval flow for the payment plan to the relevant approvers. And that approval will be captured under this tab. So it's always on record who approved it when. And then we can make the payment plan agreed, which you can see here in the middle where the tick box is. And that means that now it's a done deal. So now the agreement has been made, and now the customer needs to make this payment every week. And every time the customer makes this payment and the cash application team clears the installment, it will be removed from the account. However, the clerk will not get a notification, the collections clerk. But if the customer, for example, fails to make the payment as agreed, the clerk will automatically get a notification in their work list, so they can go click on that work list item, which will take them back to the payment plan. And then, of course, they can decide to contact the customer and say, okay, why haven't you paid us? But for example, you can also say if they're delaying a payment, or even if it's only one, the whole payment plan is going to fall due and they have to pay the full balance, which would be the last and most extreme option, of course, but it's good to have, right? So you can see here, if you manage it all centrally, right, you have the visibility, you don't need to manage anything in your Outlook calendar, you don't need to change anything up with the cash application team. And again, this will just reduce the amount of effort that a clerk has to make to manage a payment plan for a customer. And again, we would expect to see an increase in these kind of payment methods this year. You know, it will save so much time so that clerk can then look at relevant information and start chasing customers who are probably willing to pay. which is going to help you, of course, with your DSO and overdue balances.
I could just, if I just add to that,
Yeah,
Eva,
sure.
if I may, and probably, I think it fits with this bit as well. I think as you're as you're going through this year and next year, that there is every possibility, and indeed you should discussing with your senior managers that the DSOs and the overdues may well deteriorate for all the reasons that we said. But what's important, and the advantage of dashboards such as these and functionalities such as these is that when you're reporting to the management and planning going forward, the headline figure will say that perhaps your DSO has gone backwards a bit, or your overdues have gone up a bit. But what's important is to be able to show who, when, what, and why. That there's X amount of the portfolio we know about because we've agreed these repayment plans. There's X amount that it's happening because there are disputes, and there's X amount because these are customers that either can't pay or won't pay, and this helps to restructure the different strategies that are needed, all based on this real-time intelligence that I was describing at the beginning, to react quickly and in an agile fashion to whatever's coming, right? And I think carrying on from that, your next slide is about due date extension. So the information around this also, that the companies renege on what's agreed, that this is also information that is shared very quickly and can be reacted to very quickly. So,
yeah, and that's spot on actually, Mark. Thank you, because in a little bit later we're going to take a look at actual analytics, so KPI analytics, which of course is also a key element of automating if you're looking to automate your order to cash, because indeed KPIs are not only interesting to see how is a clerk performing and how is a customer performing, but the underlying idea of that, of course, is that you are able to really look at your strategies and say, why are we having all these issues in a certain area, right? So, and here we could think, for example, disputes. Why do we have tons of logistics disputes? If you typically in a manual way deal with your disputes without any reporting, and you haven't got anything to show for, or you have piles of paperwork that you need to take along to speak to the logistics manager, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you come with really detailed, nice graphed analytics, and you can really show a trend as to why you're having or seeing this upcoming, logistics disputes, then of course it's much easier to negotiate with internal stakeholders as well, to get a better, view on what's going on and adapt the strategy so you can get a better end result altogether. So we'll get to that a little bit later. What I said already by Mark, the due date extension, and that was the fourth option as a result of the collection call. It's probably also something that's going to happen quite a bit, again, probably more in the UK and Europe areas as a result of the Brexit in this case. But, probably not an uncommon situation, and typically, it's not managed anywhere. You just get an email approval for, okay, we can extend this due date by a few days. Sometimes it can be actually done in the ERP environment. Sometimes it's not, and they keep the original due date but allow the customer to pay later. So here, again, we can manage this in the system, so you have that track record. You can see who's approved it, what was exactly the due date, and ensure that you get a notification if the customer then doesn't pay by that new due date. Which is of course key, because I think a lot of the things on a day-to-day basis are overlooked maybe, and not with intention, but it's constantly managing this calendar, right? What was promised, what was said, and this is really complicated, I think, for clerks, particularly if they have a large portfolio and they have a lot of activities in the day-to-day stuff. So this was a little bit around, the importance of just automating your key collection functionalities, just to show you a little bit what is the benefit of automating those. And now we're going to take a little bit more of a look to dispute management options. So I think dispute management, of course, very key. It's always key. I mean, there are always going to be disputes in trade, right? But particularly now, I think we hear nothing from companies other than we have tons of disputes in the last 12 months. Not all of those will be legitimate disputes, but it is the easy way to extend your payments. For an invoice, right? So there's plenty of organizations, and again, probably more smaller organizations who are happy to say they have a dispute so they can get some extra time to get the cash together to pay you. So we think it's really important to be on top of your disputes, but also to have the most flexible ways of managing this. So the solution we just looked at is the sub-embedded solution, but disputes, of course, they come from the customer. So this could be happening that the customer notifies you via email, for example, prior to the due date of your invoice. It could be that the customer makes a deduction on the actual remittance, which means that they could notify you why they made that deduction, but also maybe not. So then you don't know anything, which isn't very helpful. So you need to have various ways and methods to be able to have visibility when that deduction or dispute is coming, right? So in Serrala, on the sub-embedded side, we obviously operate in the full order to cash, as we saw earlier, so also in the cash application side. And there we have a very nice, fully integrated interaction, so to speak, between the cash application solution and our collections and dispute solution, which means that if a customer makes a deduction at time of cash application and they have provided a reason why, that the person in the cash application team can apply a reason code for that specific type of dispute. So here we could think about a short shipment or a pricing error or a quality error, etc. There's plenty of options. And then that will automatically generate a dispute case in the collection solution for that specific customer with all the details as to what was short paid on the invoice, which invoice is it entailing. So that would be the in-ERP kind of setup, right? So that's very useful if you are operating in SAP. But then, of course, as I said earlier, it can also be that you receive a debit memo or just an email from a customer. Some organizations probably have a generic email address where these kind of things can be sent to, but there's also plenty of organizations who don't, which means it goes to the clerk. And this can be quite overwhelming, I think, if you get tons and tons of dispute emails with debit memos that you need to study to work out what's going on. It's very time consuming and again, not really value adding as such. So what we have in Serrala is an OCR tool, which means it's like an automated recognition tool, which scans documents, any type of documents, and can read the content of those documents and creates a fingerprint, so to speak, of that document, and therefore knows where it belongs in the actual on-premise solution, so in our case in SAP. And this smart eye tool will then allow the solution to automatically create the dispute case with the relevant reason code. So that means that a clerk doesn't have to go and print off this debit memo or open it up on their email, read through it, try to work out what's going on, where does it belong. All of that work is done by the smart eye tool, which means, of course, that the clerk has plenty more time and the dispute case is created for the relevant reason. So they can just check the dispute case, everything is okay, and then with an automated workflow, it will go to the relevant team in the organization. And just by hearing this, you can probably think, how much time could you save, for your clerk, but also for the other party in the organization that needs to deal with this dispute, right? It's also very important they get accurate information, but also that they get standardized information, because that's also something we don't always think about. But if we have a team of 25 collection clerks and they're all having logistics queries, everybody will send their own format of query information to the logistics department, which is not going to help them either, right? Because they have to read everything because it's not standardized. So if they receive a standardized format, the chances are that they will very quickly see this is going on, this is what we need to look at, and then we can provide an outcome on that specific dispute, instead of having to read everything, open up attachments, etc. So it's not only benefiting the collection and dispute clerk, but also all the areas in the business. And the faster you get a response from your logistics department and back to the clerk, the faster we can notify the customer, right? And a satisfied customer is ultimately what we want to have. And I think being efficient in your communication, driven by standardization, is probably key in that whole end-to-end process as well. So this is the Smart Eye tool. So that will be able to read any kind of incoming documents that are going through a generic email address. And then, of course, we also have like the portal that I showed you very at the beginning. So, for example, to have portal access for customers, where they can raise a claim on the portal, right? So they can access the portal anytime, anywhere, raise the dispute there, and then the portal will push this information into the relevant account number on the actual solution in our case, create that dispute file record, so to speak, and off it goes with the automated workflow to the relevant team again to, with standardized information to fix this dispute and feedback to the clerk in the collections team. If you think about that you could work and operate this way versus what you may be doing currently, and I'm sure everybody in the audience here works very different depending on the nature of your business, right? But I'm also sure that some of those elements I'm describing are sounding extremely familiar for most of you. So if you think what you could benefit by looking at automating this and really, as Mark said earlier, have really good outputs in the sense of KPIs, and you can really then in the longer term start really thinking about tweaking your internal strategies. So everybody in the organization is going to benefit from a really well-driven value-adding, process. Which is obviously going to help your bottom line. It's going to help your working capital position and your cash flow. And this is what we all want, right? So particularly in those days. Okay, so let's quickly move on. I will skip this one. I basically kind of described it just now. So I'm just going to quickly show you the dispute management. What would it look like? So it's very high level, of course, but again, we have this operation in our system, and it allows you to create this dispute case. A clerk can also still do this manually in here, so to speak, if it's not automatically triggered through the cash application portal or Smart Eye functionality. And then it's a very simple setup. We can see the reason code, so there could be anything. So here we have unknown reason code, which is also possible, of course. If you do not know what is the query, say for example, the client made a deduction on the remit, and they didn't notify, on the remit what the deduction is for, then the dispute case from the cash application side will still be created, but with the unknown reason code, which means that the clerk in the collections team will have to reach out to the customer through the correspondence tab, to ask what is the reason for this particular deduction. And then when the customer has responded and we know what is the reason, we can change the reason code for the dispute. And then once it has the specific reason code, it will trigger an automatic workflow going to the relevant team in the organization. So of course, we want to know from the full invoice how much has been paid, what amount was disputed, is there a particular priority to get this fixed, for example? Is there a reference from the customer side, which is kind of useful, of course, as well? And most important, what is the scheduled closing date? So this is also kind of useful internally. That, for example, you could say, if we're pricing disputes, we want pricing disputes to be fixed within 5 working days. So then we know that the date here needs to be 5 days from the date the dispute was created. So, you can also kind of standardize the timelines internally in how you want, how quickly you want to resolve your disputes. And this also really helps, right? Because I think you get a dispute, it goes off to this logistics department, but it probably goes on a pile of God knows all sorts of other work. So there is not really fixed timeline, which means that they may not actually look at it in the short term, which is not benefiting you as a clerk and your customer not happy. So internally, you could define and say, okay, for a logistics query, we want that to be fixed within 5 working days from data receipt. If we have a pricing issue, that can be done much quicker. That needs to be fixed within 2 days from receipt. So you can set some certain standards internally. And that, again, over a period of time, will kind of structure the way this other team internally is going to respond, right, on the queries. And they will get used to it over a period of time. So then they see, okay, I have a pricing issue. It needs to be fixed the day after tomorrow, right? And then you will see that you get a kind of a rhythm. And that, of course, will help again in managing those disputes. So for the clerk, of course, that is dealing with the solution, they need to have good visibility as to what disputes are outstanding on the account. So of course, there is a comprehensive overview of all the dispute cases. So they can run this based on, like, for example, customer or specific company code or country, etc. So they can define what kind of content they want to see in the report. But it's very important that they have visibility to what disputes are outstanding, how long is it taking, who's dealing with it, etc. So again, you can see that you could actually do much more with your disputes, bigger picture internally in your organization, also driving that customer satisfaction, just by managing this in a much more automated way rather than doing this manually. Right, so if we then take a look at, and this is a screenshot of our solution, collection solution, dispute solution. And for example, here in the dashboard, where's all the customer relevant information, of course, performance information. And here you can see the disputed amount of the total AR. So you can already see it. You get a nice percentage, for example, and how many disputes are outstanding as well. So you have nice visibility of the total picture. And then, of course, also of the total portfolio AR. So that kind of helps as well. Of course, you get your DSO. So it's really nice if the clerk has a centralized view of what the real-time performance of a customer is. And of course, what part of this outstanding AR is actually in dispute. So you can really manage this in the most efficient way. So that's really key, I think, for clerks to have that kind of data. Then this was the Smart I was talking about. So this OCR tool that will really help, capture those debit memos you receive from a customer, those email bodies with all the data on specific disputes, line items, product groups as well. All of this can be read through this Smart I tool. And will help you automate this, receipt of the dispute information from the customer all the way to triggering the workflow to get this dispute to be in the right area in your organization. And that will really help. This is Serrala unique, this technology, so we're very pleased with this. It's also used in our cash application tool solution for reading the remittances that come in, so all the bank data that comes in. And this is a very, very popular technology amongst our customers. So, and now, of course, also used in the connection side of things. So we would definitely recommend considering looking at what it can and can't do. So this is what I explained earlier, right? So it's the automatic imports. It puts a format to it, right? A fingerprint, and then it will also do some machine learning along the way. So it will pick up on more and more details the more it's being used. And the automation rate will really lie quite high versus if you do things manually today. Then the portal. So we kind of launched this portal connectivity for customers quite recently. So the portal is also still under development. However, just want to emphasize the use of a simple yet efficient portal for a customer, right? It's very nice if a customer can just log into this portal, see their invoices. If they have an issue, they can raise a claim there, and this information is being fed straight back into your solution, the FS2 connection and dispute solution. So again, it will eliminate the amount of calls you might have to make to customers. because you have that integration, you know, in your ERP and the external elements like the portal, like the Smart Eye, like maybe your cash application and reason code using. So it becomes a very different dynamic than how you manage your customers, but also what the clerks are focusing on a day-to-day basis. And that should hopefully benefit everyone. So again, the portal, we have the invoices, etc. We'll go on to the next slide. What is very important internally, so because our solutions are, of course, at the moment, what I'm showing you today is sub-embedded, but of course, there's always individuals in the organization who are not actually operating in SAP. But for example, if you have disputes and they need to go to the logistics department and these people are not operating in SAP, that typically means everything is done over the email. So the other benefit of the portal is that it can be used internally. So if we were to create a dispute, that the dispute can be routed to the logistics team, and that the logistics team has access to this portal and they can see neatly lined up all the pending queries for their department, and they can click on the particular query and they will get all the information around the query. And then once they've done their investigation, they can put comments, they can attach documents, and then they can say, okay, I reject or I confirm this dispute. And that will then be fed back into the FS2 connection and dispute solution. So again, you can see it's not just automation benefits for your collection clerk or your dispute management team, but this goes beyond, right? And this is really important, that you're looking at a bigger picture, because everybody plays an important and vital role in the end-to-end order to cash. But you have very big dependencies on other teams in the organization. And ultimately, I guess every CFO just wants to see that bottom line being strong. So, you know, you want to be able to work as well as possible with other internal stakeholders for really good results. And these kind of things would really help you get there if you are not automated at all today. Then, of course, there are also some, you know, companies who may use other third-party software platforms. You know, here a lot what we hear is Salesforce, for example, to inform sales individuals around certain activities within the credit environment or the connections environment. So it's also possible, for example, to consider the automation of the solution with such third-party APIs. Our solutions can do this. So, you know, again, another layer of, you know, automation that will reach out to another party in your organization, right? So in this instance, for example, Salesforce, we reach out to sales. So that really broadens all the integration between all these various departments, helping you to do as effective as possible collection activities on a day-to-day basis, and that the collaboration becomes better. I think that's already proven. You know, and of course, if you have better collaboration, you're going to have better outputs. That's a given. So I think if you're thinking of, you know, automating, you're thinking of ROI, that's all the aspects that you need to think about, right? So is it only ROI based on what my collection clerk is doing, or is it a bigger picture ROI? I would really recommend to take a bigger picture look, because you will find that there are many more benefits than just for your collections and dispute departments. Then touching upon this standardized communication that we talked about at the beginning. You see there was so it's very important to have standardized communications. So here we have an example of what our solution produces. These are predefined Word templates that are integrated in the solution. Because they're Word templates, they can be on different languages, they can be on different letterhead papers. So you as a user would be able to define this. But how nice for your customer, every time you're going to ask them a question, they get the same layout communication, you know, so they know what they're getting from you, they know what to look at. And that, again, will really help. So, okay, so we have a next and I think last voter question. And I think then we are moving on to the Q&A session already. So I would like to know quickly, how do you currently manage your connections and dispute KPIs?
Okay, exciting.
Okay, right. So
Right, there we go.
there's only a few. But it doesn't matter. I think this is the expected answer. Everything's done in Excel and email, which is kind of the standard, right? So, and that's not strange or anything. But again, I think I've shown you today, you could manage these activities in a more standardized, centralized way, right? With benefits not only for your connection clerk, but for the bigger picture in the organization, helping you to really drive improved cash flow because you're getting your receivables in quicker. And also over the long term, find a way to really adjust the strategies in your organization to minimize your level of disputes, to improve your customer satisfaction levels, and also to improve internal relations, right? If you know what you can offer each other, you're going to get better relationships. So I'm just gonna, I think I have a last slide here, maybe on the reporting, and then I'll give the floor back to Mark and Esther. So again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, KPI reporting for management, really worthwhile considering to have a solution that comes with a really good, strong balance sheet, analytics tool. So you have insights on your KPIs, right? Preferably as real time as possible. So you can share this information with the key stakeholders, probably more C-level and management level individuals in your organization. The tool needs to have the flexibility to drill down so you can get to the right information that you're looking for, be it based on the clerk or a specific country or a currency or etc. But it needs to give that flexibility. We at Serrala have this really nice looking BI analytics tool, which is a ClickSense tool. It's web-based, so you can access it anytime, anywhere. So in any meeting, you can pull up this data and you will get all this content directly from this FS2 connections and dispute solution straight into this tool. And you will have the visibility on the performance there and then, which means you can make informed decisions and ultimately adapt strategies over a period of time. And here we can just see a few of the slides, what it looks like. You get nice graphs, you can click on those elements, and then it will give you the underlying information as to what it's made up of. So, user-friendly, accessible anywhere, and of course, good drill down on all the various elements that are happening inside the connections environment. So your disputes, how many connection calls are you placing, etc., etc. Okay, so I think, and again, we will share this slide deck so you can take a look at those particular questions, pictures later. But I think the ultimate benefits of automation, is know your customer. Yeah, you're aware what you can expect from your customer. Cost reductions, that's what everybody is looking for at C-level, of course, so very important and absolutely worthwhile. It may sound like quite an investment if you need to automate initially, but you really need to look longer haul, and bigger picture, as I said earlier. Transparency, get those, like good reporting, be able to collaborate with your internal stakeholders to get an end-to-end business process that's working, of which connections and dispute management is a key pivotal process part, right? Accelerate and optimize your processes. Back to the beginning, always worth, looking at your processes. What are you doing today? How long are you doing it? Why are you doing it? Is it actually giving you anything, right? And don't be afraid to ask questions to people. Like, how are you doing this? Or could we do it differently? Or, but that's definitely key, I think, particularly if you decide to automate. Scalability solution, of course, that you're opting for needs to be able to grow with your environment, and you want to have investment safety. So, for example, our solutions are sub-embedded. We are currently substandard, ECC6 it's called. It's the standard, but we're already sub S4HANA ready and certified as well. So you need to look at these things. So I think this concludes it from my side. So I hope it has been useful. This is the last and final voter question. And then I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. Thank you very much.
Okay, whilst we're doing the voting, does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask Eva or myself? It's gone very quiet.
Yeah,
I do have a question. It's Laszlo here.
Laszlo, yes, sir.
Yeah, so I actually really like the solution. My only fear that probably it works very well with bigger corporations who have huge collection shops and fairly big amount of disputes. Could this work in a smaller company setup or a medium-sized company setup where there are some disputes and there are collections follow-up, but not like dozens a month, but only like, let's say, hundreds?
yeah.
So would volume needed to justify such a Serrala solution, or actually you think that a certain volume is needed actually?
No, so it's a very good question, and thank you for that, Laszlo. No, so we actually offer our solutions in 2 formats. So we have the one very full-on one, which you're probably be geared a bit more towards the medium to larger sized organizations. But we also have a rapid deployment version of our connection and dispute solution. Then it's not as complete, but you will get the key functionality. So things like your connection calls, promise to pay, and dispute case issuing, you will get that. And of course, the analytics tool will come with that as well. So if you have any interest in finding out a little bit more about the rapid deployment, then do please reach out and I'll be happy to give you a demo and take you through all the benefits and ins and outs of that solution. But it's more like a simplified form of the full-blown solution. And that really serves much like smaller, medium-sized companies. So So absolutely happy to show you, and I think it could definitely bring benefits to smaller organizations for all the reasons I've given you earlier. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eva. And
You're
just
very welcome.
And maybe that question is stupid or silly in a way that I'm not very technical expert, but so our company is using SAP, and we are just in a process of migrating to S/4HANA.
Yeah.
Does that have any implication on your solution, or it doesn't?
No, our solutions are S/4HANA certified already. And they can be migrated through a transport. So if we were to implement it on your current ECC6, I would assume, subsystem, then we can migrate it over by the time you are going on to S/4HANA. And then the solution, of course, will operate under the same credentials as S/4HANA, so the business partner levels. Okay. And again, we can show you that in more detail if you have.
Sure, definitely interested in learning more. So
okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laszlo. Any
other questions?
Is a good answer to the poll as well. So everybody is considering investing in automated solutions. So it's the correct answer. Thank you very much. If there's no further questions, but as we said, we are both available. Please get in touch with us anytime. We'd love to hear from you. We will make the video version of this available and the slides too. In the meantime, I think the overarching message really is that the visibility on the data and I think perhaps another key takeaway is that working in our area, the order to cash area, is big data. All right, so we are big data as much as anybody else within your organization. So the visibility and the ability to react in real time has never been more important than it is right now. So on that, so thank you everybody for attending. Eva, thank you very much for all the hard work and the preparation and so on. It's been a pleasure working with you today.
Thank you.
Esther, also thank you for the hard work you put in bringing it together. And we'll see you all soon, I'm sure. In the meantime, on behalf of Eva, Esther, and myself, take care, stay safe, and see you all very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day. Thank you.